Okay, good. Let me begin sharing my slides. I'm going to try not to keep you the whole hour and 15 minutes, okay? I realize that we have other things to do anyway, but I've got about 20 slides here I want to go through for a hot wash, just a review of the semester so far. And if I had placed my slides right, what that would say is a mid-semester hot wash, okay? So let's do that. What I'm going to go over is the written reports and the oral reports. Mostly the written reports have been pretty good. There have been a few folks have stumbled, a little regression, some incomplete submissions, and what I mean is by less than 1,000 words. Just let me remind you that that first submission, we call it a draft, but I don't like that word. We'll probably come up with another term. That's your first submission, and it needs to be complete. It doesn't need to have holes in it like, oh, this is my draft, I'm still working on this part. No, it needs to be a complete submission. The oral reports are really, really happy with the oral reports. A lot of improvement from the first one to the second one, and even the first ones have been pretty good. Toward the end of this class, I want to discuss I want you to share with me some of your observations and improvements that you think you've made, okay? Or maybe you want to compliment one of your team members or somebody else that you've watched and you've seen them improve. So think about what you might say. Still some work that needs to be done. So first, let's talk about the written reports. Overall, like I said, good effort. There has been some improvement over last semester. Some of the things that some of the technical aspects and the formatting have come together, but some of you not so much. And we're going to talk about some backsliding that's occurred, particularly in the ASABE format with regard to citations and references. So I'll review that. The writing style, I'm pretty happy with. There's been a consistent improvement, I think, in the tone of your papers. It's definitely not reading like your creative writing class that you maybe took in high school. So the writing style has been pretty good for the most part. But most importantly, your paper communicates the hard work that your teams have done. And that's really, the focus of this class. It's great to solve the problem, but, to be honest, this is an academic college class, and it's a writing intensive and communication intensive class. So ultimately, our focus is, can you communicate effectively the hard work that you've done through discussing your problem? What needs to be improved, and this is what I'm going to cover, is ASAB format, the organization of your papers, your material flow analysis needs some work. Potential solutions, recommended solution selection analysis, I'll talk about those. Drawings, haven't seen a lot of drawings, we'll talk about that. So let's talk about ASAB format. Like most knucklehead professors, I'm not going to spend much time on the things you did good. I kind of acknowledge that. I'm going to spend more time on the critique, okay? Sorry about that. Figures and tables. I think y'all are getting that pretty well. There are figures and there are tables, the two artifacts that you're going to place within the text. And, you're getting the captioning done just to keep everybody on their toes. Remember that the label for the figure goes below, and it's different for tables. It goes above, right? And it's going to be table 1, period, and the name of the table, the description, and a citation where that data came from, if it came from some source other than yourself or your team. Probably the most common error there is that you will put the table in the paper and fail to label it. So you got to have a label. And what's the second thing you have to do when a table appears in your paper? Caleb, tell me. It's got to be mentioned in the text. And it needs to be mentioned in the text before the table or figure appears. And you don't say in figure 1 below, you'll just say in figure 1 has a graph of the rainfall for the last 10 years for this area. And then figure 1 will appear somewhere after that paragraph with the graph of the rainfall for that area, something like that. So let's talk about citations. That's the area that's really hurting, okay? The citations are the tag that you put in the text to tell the reader where this information came from. And that tag is going to be pointing to the reference section. So it's related to the reference section. And it has to be related in a way where the reader can find the reference where this information came from. Okay? Let me show you. Here's a good form here. The Central Intelligence Agency, parentheses, year, reported that 37%, blah, 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 okay? That's a way of citing the source of that information. That's one way to do it as it flows through the text. You give the source, and then in parentheses, the year. Now that tells me that somewhere, because you've done that, that's like a big spotlight to me, or a red star cluster. No, you don't know what that is either. You're showing me that if I look in the references, I'm going to look for a reference that says Central Intelligence Agency 2017, and I could go look up that document to find out more about this information. Okay. Here's another one. This is actually not from a paper this year, but here is. Let me get rid of you guys there. Thank you. Notice in this reference, man, this is not a smart computer. It doesn't have a pen. Okay, I'll just do it with my, see if I can do that. Maybe there's one. Is there a pen on this thing? There it is. They hid it. Oh, cool. Okay. So notice I've got some citations in this paragraph. Here's one. Yuck. So here's one, and here's one. So what's happened here is the author has told me something about this railway in Azerbaijan, and he gives the last name of the author of the paper, comma, year. And then he gives some other information about transportation railways in Europe or whatever, and then he cites another source. So this tells me that the information about railways in Azerbaijan came from two sources, here and here. Okay, so that's a good way to do it. Now here's an example that I don't think is very good, because you've got these heinous symbols here, quotation marks, okay? Now, I acknowledge that you want to make sure that you properly cite the source of your material and that you're not accused of plagiarism. I appreciate that, okay? But you don't, we don't want to see you actually take direct quotes out of a source and put them in quotation marks in your paper. Go ahead and rewrite that in your own words. So summarize that. Particularly if it's some of you put long quotes. You copy and paste the whole paragraph, you put quotation marks around it, and you cite the source. That's not what we want to see. You need to summarize that. You need to write that in your own words. And sometimes you're taking some information that's a little too technical for the reader or your client, and you have to bring it down to a useful business writing style level. That's what you want to do here instead of using quotes. And then, of course, you give the source, author, comma, year. So let's not see any of this. Rewrite that. Certainly, you don't want to cut and paste and pass it off as your own, but the way to properly deal with that is rewrite it. Don't just put quotation marks around it. Okay. Here's one. Again, I've got, and here's the problem with this one. I've got two citations in this paragraph, and they are both the same. What would you do? What would you do with this one, Kyle? How would you improve this paragraph? Yeah, there's really no reason for this citation except that this sentence right here is some new information the author. So the author is commenting on that, and then he's giving more information from the same source. So just to clean that up a little bit, go ahead and put all that information from that one source and put the citation at the end, okay, instead of citing the same source multiple times throughout the paragraph. That's just cleaned it up a little bit. Dr. Costello, any comments about citations and references?
No, I think this is one issue with most of the teams that I have been grading the manuscript. So you have addressed it right. And I will add that this reference, notisat, more, whatever, it should be notisat at all, right? One more point. Otherwise, yeah, everything is making sense.
Thank you for reminding me of that. So instead of putting multiple authors, the appropriate way to cite multiple authors, more than two, is et al. Okay, as college students, you're expected to know some Latin, so you need to throw that around every now and then, okay, to earn that big paycheck you're going to get. They're not complicated Latin words, okay, but use them when you can. So one author, two authors, you put their names in there. Multiple authors, more than two, you put et al. Thank you. Okay. And as far as references, make sure that the references are in alphabetical order. And you only include the references or sources that you cite in the paper. So your reference section is not a bibliography. Okay, a bibliography would include everything that you have looked at, even if you don't use it in the paper. That's not what this is. So we're going to streamline this, and something only appears in the references if you use it in that paper, okay? And if you cite something, make sure it shows up in the references. It's a link. You got to complete the link. Okay, let's talk about paper organization. The table of contents is an important tool that gives the reader an idea of what to expect. It's also handy for you to use as an outline. So don't just blast through your table of contents. Put some thought into it. You know, we're not expecting a big detailed table of contents, just the major sections. But that's going to also be an outline for you as you write the paper. So that's your first opportunity to establish a logical flow of the thoughts you're going to communicate in the paper. And you're going to communicate this logical flow of thoughts in what we call paragraphs. Anybody ever heard of those? Okay. Paragraphs are a unit, let me say a system of sentences that are related in common thought. Some of you, your paragraphs are all jumbled. You just got all sorts of thoughts in there, random thoughts that are not related. Okay, that's not a good paragraph. So your paragraph, let me harken back to 8th grade English class. It's going to start with a topic sentence, and then you're going to have some supporting sentences that talk about that topic in more detail, and it might conclude with a concluding sentence to kind of sum up that thought. Then you will begin a new paragraph with a new thought. Anybody ever heard this before? Shouldn't be a foreign concept. Sorry to be sarcastic, but some of you are having trouble grasping that, okay? So your paragraphs should generally keep one thought. And these papers are a great way to practice that because, for example, here's potential solutions from some other project similar to what one is going on this year. So here's one with potential solutions. And notice I've got 3 paragraphs. Each paragraph has a word in bold up above it that is called a heading. So this is a heading, and these are subheadings. So it's very easy for me as I'm reading this to go, okay, we're going to be talking about potential solutions now. What type of potential solutions are we going to be talking about? Oh, apparently sensor types. I wonder what kind of sensor types we're going to be discussing. Boom, capacitive. Boom, photoelectric. Boom, ultrasonic. And then each subheading follows with 1 or 2 paragraphs talking about that potential solution with respect to that thought. Okay? Now, I'm not saying this is a perfect example, but this is a good example of organizing your thoughts in paragraphs. Okay? Now, it'd be okay to begin this section with an introductory paragraph that says, we're going to talk about 3 different sensor types: capacitive, photoelectric, and ultrasonic. So don't confuse, I'm talking about, don't confuse what I'm saying. An introductory paragraph can have multiple thoughts in it, but it's guiding you toward what's going to follow. Okay? Material flow. some of you have seen a lot of these Q versus Q comments on your papers. Probably the biggest problem with your material flow analyses is it's lacking some actually analysis. It's very conceptual in nature. We have water flowing system. There's going to be a lot of water when it rains and not so much water when it doesn't rain. Okay, that's not very useful to the client. So you need to do some research and use some quantitative terms. Okay, so quantitative versus qualitative. So this is your time for quantitative analysis. How much flows through your system? Quantify as much of that as possible. If you're trying to look for plastic contamination in cotton, then there's some data out there that it's going to get that they've actually quantified some of that. Animals, whatever's flowing through your system, don't just talk about it conceptually. We got a lot of labor in our system. We've got 3 or 4 guys here, and then there are 3 or 4 guys here. You're throwing some numbers in there, but it needs to be as specific as possible. Another thing that you can put in your material flow analysis is time. So how much time does it take for this material to flow through your system, whether it's water, people, heat, energy. So you want to look for flow rates. Okay, so your material flow analysis, can not only quantify the amount of material, but the time it takes to flow through your system. Now, that's not going to work for every item that you're analyzing, but when it does apply, try to use that. As you're doing your material flow analysis, concentrate on those areas where problems are likely to occur in your problem. So you're trying to solve a problem, so focus your material flow analysis on the areas where the problems are occurring. So if you're looking for plastic contamination in cotton, you don't really need to do an analysis of the electricity of the cotton gin. That's really not part of the problem. But the amount of cotton that flows through, the amount of plastics flows through, that is useful. Okay. Again, here is a time where you can do 1 paragraph for each item. So your introductory paragraph would say, we found 20 different items that flow through our system. We're going to analyze these 3 because we believe they're the most problematic and are going to lead us to a solution. And so those 3 then are what you're going to have 3 paragraphs, perhaps each beginning with a subheading, where you do your flow analysis, okay? This is a good place for tables and figures. Again, you're trying to quantify the data, your flow analysis, and rates. And again, your flow analysis ultimately should point you toward a potential solution. So here's one from a couple of years ago. There was a rainwater harvesting system that they were going to install somewhere. And what they've done is they've done a flow analysis on the water through this system by taking a look at the average rainfall in the area, looking at the dimensions of the catchment systems, roofs of the structures on this property, and they've quantified it by determining how many gallons they could potentially catch. Look over there at the right. You see how they did that? So that's a pretty good example of, they didn't just say, yeah, for this rainwater harvesting problem, it's going to rain, and we got to catch the rain. Okay? They quantified it as much as possible. Potential solutions. This is another error point where your potential solutions need to all be significantly different. We're looking for about 3 potential solutions if you can, maybe 2 if you can justify that, maybe 4, but around 3 potential solutions that are all significantly different. They need to be complete and not just a part of the system. I'll give you an example of that. That's the most common error. Okay, so each potential solution needs to stand alone. You need to be able to compare one potential solution to the other potential solutions so that you can recommend one of those to the client. Here's an example. So if your problem is crop production, trying to figure out what crop to produce in an arid region, you might be tempted to say, well, potential solution 1, we're going to try to figure out what our source of water is going to be. It can either be a well, a rainwater harvesting system, or we're going to use the surface water. And so potential solution 1 is we've decided we're going to use a well. What's the problem with that potential solution? It's only one component of the overall system. And the middle word of your major is systems. So you must approach your potential solutions with a systems approach and not a compartmentalized approach, okay? So, for example, potential solution 2, they said, well, we're going to use a generator instead of a solar power or wind power. That's not a complete standalone system. That is a component of the overall system. So you can see each of these potential solutions, which I just made up, okay, doesn't stand alone. The client can't say, I like potential solution 2. Let's get a generator. That doesn't get his crop watered, okay? It just provides power. So how would you take these components and build 3 independent, significantly different potential solutions? Let me pick one of our Zoom students, Doug Dendy. Your face just happens to be up on the screen. Lucky you. So how would you take the information I've given here and correct this problem and have 3 different potential solutions? What would they look like?
Well, I guess you could still use something like a generator, but instead of just saying a generator, you would say, oh, we're using the generator to power so-and-so, which is being used in conjunction with so-and-so to complete. I don't know exactly what you would say, but you would talk more about the entire system as a whole and how the generator would help that system function.
How about you, Cameron? You want to take a shot at this? Nope, I lost Cameron.
Sorry, my stuff's going in and out.
Go ahead.
I think I would have been generalizing kind of like Doug did, but specifically with the crop production, I guess you would have to be more specific in what that generator would be used to power.
Okay, so let me kind of give you all a tip. Kyle, go ahead. Okay, that might be an approach. Here's what I'm looking for, okay? These are all components of a system. So what you've identified here is my solution is going to have 3 components. It's probably going to have more than this, but my system is going to be made up of some combination of these components. Some kind of water source, some kind of energy source, and some sort of irrigation mechanism. The combination of those are going to be my solution. So how would I approach potential? Let's make up a, how am I going to differentiate these? So let's come up with one that would be an economical solution. What would be the lowest cost solution to my client? So perhaps that would be just capturing surface water, okay? So potential solution 1 is going to have surface water as the component for the water source. And what's the most economical power generation system? Maybe a generator, okay? So it's going to have a generator. And what's the most economical method of getting water to the plants? Let's say it's an open channel, okay? So potential solution 1, we're going to call this the economical solution. That's the one that's maybe the least cost. And it's got 3 components. It's going to be surface water pumped by a generator into these open channels to water the crop. Potential solution 2, let's call this the environmental friendly one, okay, the more ecological. So I want to use rainwater harvesting for my water source. I'm going to use, heck, either solar or wind. Let's pick wind, because that's really cool. And I'm going to use drip irrigation system, okay, drip. So I'm going to call this my environmentally friendly one. And then my third one might be the most, if cost is no object, the most expensive one, or maybe the most effective one, maybe the most reliable one, okay? So what's going to be the most reliable? Well, a well might be the most reliable. A generator might be more reliable than the other two. So I can still I can still use the same component. And maybe a spray system. I don't know, whatever. So you see what I mean? You're coming up with 3 complete solutions that have all the components required for solving the problem. And they're different in terms of their character. Okay? So much so that you can characterize them by what's in common. Any questions about that? And they stand alone. The client may say, look, I'm really on a budget, so I like those other 2, but I'm going to have to, I think potential solution 1 is probably the best for me. And you can say, no problem, potential solution 1. It's got we're going to use surface water, pumps powered by a generator into the open channels that we're going to cut alongside the crops. Okay? So you don't have to mix and match. Not seeing many drawings yet. There's still an opportunity. We got the recommended solutions and economic analysis coming up. So perhaps you are being frugal in your use of your time, and your recommended solutions maybe didn't demand a drawing, okay? Some of you have done some drawings, and they're pretty good. But now is the time, as you're writing and preparing your recommended solution, to use some of the drawing tools that we presented to give a diagram of how your solution is laid out, or schematic, or how the components are connected together, whatever, all right? So if you can, use some of those drawing tools. Really would like to see that. And maybe that's too short notice for your recommended solution paper, but you could work on it at least for your final paper. Decision matrices. Make sure you always proof your slides. I did this kind of rapidly this morning, so I didn't check that. Sorry about that. Decision matrices and selection analysis. Okay, your decision matrices were pretty good. The mechanics of them were good. We need to make sure that you discuss the criteria. So what's going to be required in that decision matrix section of your paper? The decision matrix itself, which is a table 4 decision matrix, okay? And then a discussion of those criteria. And the discussion needs to include how did you select these criteria? Was the client involved? Why you're weighting a certain criteria higher than another, and then a little bit of how each of these criteria was used to analyze your solution, how you scored it, okay? So there's a lot there. The decision matrix section is not just the matrix itself. You ought to have 3 or 4 decision comparison criteria and discuss that in the text. The selection analysis, here you can discuss the advantages and disadvantages of each solution. It's hard to see that in the decision matrix. I would even say the selection analysis is a place to fill in the gaps that maybe are not communicated in the decision matrix. The decision matrix is very quantitative. Here's an opportunity for qualitative analysis to explain a little bit more about why one solution might be better than another. Now, there was one team in their oral presentations that did a good job in integrating the selection analysis in with the decision matrix in their oral presentation. That's jumping forward to the oral presentation. So we'll talk about that later. Now, just looking ahead, we've got the economic analysis paper coming up along with the recommended solution. So it should be present your recommended solution. That's probably going to take maybe a page to describe in more detail. You're going to take one of those potential solutions and develop it more in depth. So review the assignment. You're going to recommend a solution, and you're going to do the economic analysis of that solution. And if you can, we're looking for payback period, net present value analysis, rate of return, if it lends itself to this problem. Not all problems may be able to do that. But if you can't, do a solution cost comparison. In other words, This solution is the most cost-effective because it gives you, it's the least expensive of the other solutions, you know, that kind of thing. Here was an example of one where there was some good analysis here, as well as you've got, you know, a table properly labeled, showing the cash flow analysis and all that with payback period. So that's the kind of thing we're looking for in the recommended solution economic analysis section. Now, just to remind you, when you do your risk analysis implementation plan, there's major components here. Risk analysis you're going to identify some risks, and you're going to develop maybe the top 3 or 4. The risk, and when you discuss a risk, what do you always discuss immediately after the risk? Mitigation. How you're going to mitigate that risk. Mitigation means how you're going to reduce the effects of the impact of that risk, okay? And your risk analysis should not be about the risks that occur when you're installing the solution, just on the solution as it's implemented, what kind of risks would be. So here's a good form of that. This first, here we're talking about an irrigation drainage risk. This paragraph defines the risk and talks about it. And here they transition to another paragraph where they say to mitigate this risk, and they talk about the mitigation, okay? So don't omit some discussion of the mitigation. Gantt charts in the implementation plan. You want to show a timeline of the implementation of your solution. This is about the only time you're really going to discuss perhaps how your solution is installed, but it would be better about how the solution is implemented throughout the operation of your system. Your text is going to describe the activities that you listed here. So if there's project approval, drainage reconstruction, each one of those could be a paragraph describing these activities. Okay, see, like that. All right, let's move on to oral reports. Any questions or comments before we get into that about the written reports? Anything to add there, Dr. Castell?
I just want to say that you have given very good examples on the potential solutions. I like to see the subheadings. Many of the drafts talk about the first solution, second solution, and it's hard to follow up. So I think your example was very good. And the other one, the recommended solution. So I think you are really providing the students very good examples to follow. So make sure they produce very good written reports. That's my only comment. Thank you.
So we've not only reviewed the past papers, but I'm giving you some tips on the papers coming up, okay? So let's talk about oral reports here. These are some of the things I'm going to address, the templates and slide prep, figures and tables, background section timing, all that stuff, okay? Templates and slide prep. So the templates is your PowerPoint template, and the way you prepared your slides, pretty good. I really have no major critique here. What I like is that you took what has been presented either in this class or by some guest lecturers, or hopefully you took your COM 203 class, your oral presentation class, and you've implemented that in this class. So good job. Font sizes have not been too small. We've gotten away from the strain on my eyes. That's good. The photo sizes have been nice and big. And when you do tables, you highlight specific numbers. So that's all real good. Let's talk about figures and tables within your presentations. Remember, when you cite a figure and table, use the ASAB citation on the slide. Don't cut and paste the website, okay? So don't do that when you have a figure. Here, I've just got the website there. That's messy. Don't need to see that, okay? What I need to see is something like that. All right, that tells this is a presentation. We're not going to, go from here directly to the references. But you're simply drawing things out from your paper the paper is going to have the details of where to find this, okay? Begin each presentation with a very short review of your project. That's helpful to, obviously, me and Dr. Castell, because we see 9 of these throughout the semester, so we're like, what are you guys talking about again? It takes us a while to get into it. So do us a favor, give us a slide. You're doing that pretty good. Keep it short. Tell us what the project's about. Include what you're trying to accomplish. What is the problem you're trying to solve? What's the objective and the deliverables? That's good for you. Don't lose sight of that. Always keep that in view during your planning to keep you going down a rabbit hole that you didn't mean to go on. The timing of the presentations have been good. Most of the presentations have been right in there, about 15 minutes or so. Had a few that were longer than that. Typically, when a presentation is too long or too short, that tells us you didn't rehearse it. So again, go through the presentations. If you're having trouble hitting the timing, you may want to go through it. And if you find that you're too short, you're going to have to add something. If you're too long, you need to cut something out. Your presentation style is improving. Voice inflection. You know, the way I'm talking right now, I don't talk to you like this when you're in my office or when we're in the hallway talking. I'm using a different voice that I've gotten used to using. It's my presentation voice. Okay, I'm going to pause sometimes between ideas to give you a chance to stop and process those ideas. Also, I will talk slowly and more concisely, giving more enunciation to the vowels and consonants, particularly when I'm doing an online presentation to try to overcome the filters of electronics. So think about that and try to work on that yourselves. Your mannerisms are good. We've really, I tell you, in the past, I used to see students fiddling with their belt buckles or playing with their Aggie ring. Y'all have done a real good job there. You've done improvements. You've improved in some of your stuttering, like saying a lot. There's a good job there. Zoom, you've overcome a lot of the Zoom issues where you've had to figure out how to get connected. Hadn't had anybody stumble there. And then you've figured out how to do a good presentation when you're just sitting there in your apartment or something like that. So good job. Let's talk briefly about some self-critique comments. I've asked some of you during the course of the presentations to share your self-critique. What are some self-critique comments that you thought were noteworthy? You watched your presentation and you said, wow, I really do this and I need to fix that. And what did you fix? Andres. Okay, so if you couldn't hear him, he's talking about his pacing. He noticed that his pacing was kind of fast in his first presentation, so he deliberately slowed down his pacing so he wouldn't go too fast. Okay, good. Anybody else? Somebody on the Zoom call here. Rebecca, how about you? What did you notice that you wanted to improve from your first to your second presentation?
I was hoping I wouldn't get called because I was going to say the same thing as Andres. I had issues with timing actually, and as soon as you mentioned the fillers like and things like that, kills me. So that's something I need to work on.
Okay, good. Well, I hope the self-critique was helpful to you. We found it's probably one of the most effective tools in helping you to improve your oral communication skills. Because, quite frankly, you know, me and Dr. Castell, we're kind of soft-hearted. We don't want to hurt your feelings, so we try not to hurt you too bad about your presentation. But nobody is more harsh critique of you than yourself. So this is a technique that you probably should do frequently. I actually sometimes I will review my own presentation videos to see, you know, am I standing in the right place? Where am I looking? How is my voice and my pacing? Did I go through that too fast? So that's an ongoing thing that you should always keep in mind. Lastly, I know you like that word, let's talk about client interaction. The client comments during the presentations have been pretty good. They seem pleased with what you're doing. Now, part of that might be because they were once students themselves, and they don't want to give you a harsh critique that might result in a bad grade. I realize there may be some of that going on. I actually know that there is, because sometimes I talk to the clients in a different setting, and they have a little bit different critique of your performance, okay, or the content of your performance. The main thing you want to avoid is surprising your client in a progress report. So you don't want to throw out a potential solution or a recommended solution that the client is like, where did that come from? That's out of nowhere. They're probably not going to tell us that during the presentation, but we may hear about it later. So this is an admonishment to you to make sure you are consistently giving feedback to your client between the progress reports. Has anybody actually emailed one of their clients and given them a copy of the written report? You can do that. We're not doing that. So that's for you to do. They would probably appreciate getting that. Or even a copy of the slides of your presentation before the presentation, things like that. So communicate with your client. So anybody have any issues with their client? I know we had some early on in the semester. Anybody client check off the net and you can't get a hold of them anymore? Some of you are working with the Bain teams, and hopefully we've got y'all together now and you're working together. Are there any problems there we need to know about? Hearing none. Let me just summarize today's review by reminding you this is a C class. It's a combination of the W and the O class. I don't know if there is an O class, okay? So it's writing intensive and oral communication intensive. This is the culmination of your capstone experience. We're putting you in a pretty realistic setting that some of you may experience, doing a team project, working with other people that maybe you like them, maybe you don't. Maybe they are really sharp, maybe they're not pulling their weight, and you've got to figure that out. And you've got to communicate your work both in writing and verbally with the presentation. So you're putting all this together. You're taking all your course material, economics, finance, the Ag Eco 330 or Finance 409. Maybe you are taking some technical material from a previous Ag Systems class or another elective or science class you took, and you're integrating all this to solving a problem. Now, hopefully that's why you chose this major, is because you like to solve problems, and that's what you're getting practice doing. The learning objectives here, you're practicing being professional in making your oral presentations and also in your writing. The mistakes you make in this class will just cost you a few points on an assignment. A year from now, they may cost you your job. So you're welcome. But you get to practice those mistakes, and you get our gentle critique. And, so you'll keep your job, you'll get that promotion because of what we're doing here. Hopefully you'll see what you'll hear from other people, the value of good communication. And that's really what sets college graduates apart from other people, is that they have some knowledge, but they're able to communicate that knowledge in a way that is useful and productive and gets their point across. So that's what we're ultimately trying to achieve here. Yeah, we want you to know how to do machinery management and learn about food processing and do linear programs. But if you can't communicate those things, it's really pointless. So embrace the rest of this semester and really practice that. The job you save may be your own. Okay? And remember, the best ideas are worthless if they're not properly communicated. Does anybody have anything to add? Well, first let me go to Dr. Castell.
No, overall, the oral reports have been very, very good. So I'm very pleased with the progress. I just want to remind you to the students, take advantage of the University Writing Center services. Some of you could benefit greatly and provide a good draft for us, as well as this is a chance to impress your clients. So remember, don't assume that the client or us know everything you are doing. So it has to be very clear, very well organized. So I would remind you, the University Writing Center has this great service, so use it. Overall, the reports, the oral reports are very good. I'm very impressed. There is a question from Jacob Lent.
Yeah, let me address that.
Yeah.
So Jacob on the chat said, what about the second self-critique? Well, there is no second self-critique that's graded. So no, we haven't posted that. You're not required to do it. You're welcome to do that on your own. You should always do that on your own, but there's nothing required for you to turn in, okay? I hope that answers your question, Jacob. Appreciate you being an overachiever. It's good. Any other questions? Any other comments? Yang.
Hi, so I'm gonna cover a little bit about how you schedule a practice Zoom meeting with me. So ideally, you're generating more like tables or figures by yourself, and you're gonna put it into your fourth and of course your final presentations. And I think that's a good timing that to schedule a meeting with me, so I can help you to like go over your slides, and of course to help you rehearse a little bit of your team dynamic and stuff like that. So after you finish your third oral presentation and you are open to like schedule a practice with me, and at the time you should have some sort of slides preparing toward your fourth and your final presentation as well. So just don't just come over and have nothing in hand and ask me how to do. You should know like what you're doing already. Yep. Is there any question for this one?
Also, begin looking ahead toward the end of April. That's about 6 weeks away. It might be good to start now to find a common time when you can do your final presentation with your client. You will need to find an hour where all of you and your client is available, and actually, start thinking about that within your team. And then when Yang publishes the time slots, you'll be able to quickly snap one up. So that's still a few weeks away, but start thinking about that. So start thinking about the end game. We still have 2 papers coming in. We still have 2 presentations to do, but this is going to go fast.